on my show Timeless, which, by the way, just want to give a quick shout out. I would love if you would tune in live. It's live Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern. And I have Sean on the air with me. Like, he pops up and we have these great discussions.
Do you consider that a positive?
Like 90% of the time I consider it a positive. No, sometimes I'm like, well, why did I do this? But you can call into the show and we've had great calls, or you can write in the chat and I read aloud the chat. Anyway, we were on Timeless Live about a week ago and we were talking about the State of the Union and Katie Britt's response. And I said, as much as I agree that this Katie Britt response was a disaster, why is it that there seem to be no limits that the left can go to in terms of inhumanity, destruction, irrationality, etc.? But then Senator Katie Britt gives a very poor, State of the Union response, and everyone's focusing their attention on that, and they view it as a total indictment of conservatism and republicanism. Like, why is there this double standard? We literally have on the left people making kids into furries. We have kids in schools who are barking and are drinking out of like dog cups because they think they're dogs. We have people who are murderers being let out on supervised release because of cash bail policy. But that's not an indictment of the left, right? But then if a religious man has an affair, it's an indictment on all of Christianity. If someone on the right does something stupid, it's an indictment of all of republicanism. It's a double standard. So I asked on my show, why is this? And literally as I said it, I thought of the answer. And the answer is, this is the cost of having principles. When you have principles and you stake your claim to something, whether you're a conservative and you want to conserve the principles of the American founding, or you're a Christian and you accept, Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, etc., you are very clearly showing people what it is that you believe. And so when you don't live up to that, it's a very stark contrast of you're not living up to your stated principles. Whereas on the left, and you always make this distinction, which I appreciate, between liberals and leftists. I'm speaking about leftists, not liberals. But on the left, they, by definition, do not have principles. They adhere to DEI, to intersectionality. I put up this slide from a California public school curriculum up on my show, and it shows this intersectionality chart where they're encouraging kids to judge people based on subjectivity, on immutable characteristics, and where they stack on the oppressor versus oppressed, complex. So by definition, they don't have principles. And so when they do something...
Well, why isn't DEI a principle?
Because diversity, equity, and inclusion. What is diversity? What are the principles of diversity?
You mean they don't have personal principles?
No, I don't.
They have macro principles.
No, they don't.
Diversity.
What is
diversity is
right, but they don't. It's not diversity of thought. It's
Correct.
It's not diversity if it's a black conservative. It's not diversity anymore.
Right. So forgive me.
No. Please, I appreciate.
I have believed what you have said all of my life. My way of putting your point, that's why I use the word personal, that you always encounter right-wing hypocrites, quote unquote, conservative hypocrites, Christian hypocrites, religious hypocrites. Did you ever hear the term left-wing hypocrite? Because it can't be.
Because you're progressing.
Because they don't have... No, because you're right. Because there is no standard by which they could be judged hypocritical.
Yes. They're progressive. They can always say, I'm progressing,
right.
I'm changing. There's no, standard.
But so we are at their mercy, if you will. We sin. Hypocrite.
Yes.
I would like any listener to us right now to think of a left-wing hypocrite.
Well,
who has been charged with hypocrisy by the mainstream media who's on the left.
But this is where I want to go back to your challenge of me about principles. What are their principles? They say diversity, but that's
that's
a word.
Why I said that personal that doesn't exist, but they have global principles. Not emitting carbon is a principle for the left.
But see, that's not true. That's not true.
Oh, because they jet in on their private jets to Davos.
Absolutely.
Right. They're never called out on that.
We get oil from Venezuela and from Saudi Arabia. So it's fine when they're emitting carbon over there and sending it to us, but then we're just not going to do it here because of a political purpose. They don't have principles. And I'm not talking about liberals, I'm talking about leftists. I mean, again, okay, they'll say their principle is protecting women, defending, amplifying female voices, but they don't even think there's any such thing as a woman. They, at least on the right, and trust me, I believe the Republican, I'm going to speak about conservatism, not the Republican Party, but at least with conservatism, even if you disagree with those principles, there are clearly stated principles that we're trying to conserve. But on the left, again, I'd be very willing to hear if someone has a challenge. They claim to have them, but they really don't. And their definitions of these things change.
When you think about it, what is the excuse for demanding that people keep their home at a certain temperature, but when you attend an international left-wing conference like WEF, World Economic Forum, or any of the myriad global warming conferences, and you fly in using more energy with that flight than someone does in a year,
yes,
that's not an issue. So how do you explain that? So your explanation is they don't really have those principles.
They don't. They do not have principles. And I just want to hear, by definition, they don't. By definition, because look at intersectionality. That is literally by definition not having principles.